Dr. Q. I'm making this video blog to make my journal experience meet the exceed standard on the rubric. I know the entries themselves have been a bit lengthy and anecdotal, but I just wanted to make sure I would remember the trip more than just for the school visits and more for the memories. This was the first time traveling by myself, let alone internationally, so I wanted to make sure I remembered them in full detail. I cannot begin to describe how welcoming my host family was, especially my host mom. She reminded me a lot of my own grandma, just kind of a Tika version. I felt so at home and so relaxed and so welcomed and especially well fed. And staying with Patty allowed me to see how important it is to form relationships with people, because the people in Costa Rica were a lot more willing to help you, especially if you're a foreigner, than I feel like people in the US are willing to help foreigners. I was so surprised to see at how accommodating she was with my broken Spanish. I think she knew that I understood more than I spoke. So she either slowed down her Spanish or she even went as far as to speaking English, because she did speak English, and I think she wanted me to further my Spanish skills, which I really appreciated. To me, the US is not as nearly this accommodating to outsiders, and I feel like we almost condemn or ostracize people who are different than us or who don't speak English. I really did appreciate how welcoming and friendly the people of Costa Rica were, and it definitely helped reduce my stress as a first-time international traveler. Going on to the schools, I honestly was a little shocked to go to some of the schools. The one I think that had the biggest kind of culture shock was going to the San Luis school in Monteverde, let alone being 4 hours up a mountain. I feel like it being a one-room schoolhouse was especially shocking for me. I remember my mom saying that she had a great aunt that taught in a one-room schoolhouse, and I thought that it was a thing of the 20th century. I didn't think that they really existed anymore, but I was proved wrong. And I think the one thing that surprised me the most was that all of the kids were in one classroom and were taught by one teacher. I was a little more reassured knowing that the first through third graders were separate from the fourth through sixth graders, because I feel like this had a lot more social benefits. Being with the older kids can help the younger kids, and the younger kids can learn from the older kids, but academically I still had a little trouble seeing how they would benefit if their curriculum was not as individualized as it is in the US. But regardless, the kids were so happy, and I was so happy to be there and see how happy they were to see us. And I think this brought up another point of how we used pictures as a bridge to the language gap. I know our student Jonas, I feel like, again, he could understand more than he could speak, and I think pictures really helped bridge the gap between language. And I thought it was amazing that me coming from the suburbs and going to rural Costa Rica and being able to have some means of communication with the student through pictures was just really amazing. And I feel like people in the US need to understand that there are ways to communicate with people, even if it is not through words. Again, I think this is one of the biggest takeaways that I took from the trip, is that making connections is important, and people are willing to make those connections if you are willing to put as much effort in as they are. And one school that I found closest to the US, or is like similar in structure to the US, was the Montebello school. I know this was a bilingual school, so the kids did have better English skills, and they did have more resources because of it had a tuition, so people were essentially paying for a better education, but still it was really similar to the US, and I was so excited to see all of the activities that the kids were able to complete. They were doing karate, they had dance classes, and the one thing I really enjoyed was seeing that they had recess after every 2 periods. That's unheard of in the US, and I know that's the first thing to get cut along with gym classes, but I feel like it's still so important, because if kids can't get out their energy outside or during a gym class, then they're going to act out in the classroom, and I think that's a reason for a lot of behavioral outbursts in the classroom in the US. So I think that they understand that the kids need to get outside and get active and just take a break from school instead of cutting recess to work on standardized test prep, because the test prep is only going to get them so far in life, but being able to get outside, get moving, form social relationships is what really matters in the long run. And I was so excited that I got to go into a kindergarten classroom, and a little boy named Isaac just kind of latched onto me, and he was talking about a foot away from my face the whole time in Spanish. I don't think he knew I knew too much Spanish, but I still liked that you could see kind of the egocentrism still crossed international borders, and seeing how they learned the same way as people in English-speaking countries do, and seeing that if they were learning a letter, like for example, they had the letter D on the board, so they had the letter D written in uppercase, lowercase, they had the word dinosaur, and then a picture. So just seeing how the scaffolding techniques crossed was also really interesting. And there wasn't a lack of discipline, I would say, but I would say there was more freedom in the classroom during transitions. I know the teacher wasn't yelling at the kids to be quiet or sit quietly with their hands in their laps, which I know is a big thing in the US, but the kids were allowed to talk to their neighbors, kind of do things at their own pace. They weren't rushed to finish anything, which I thought was really nice, because I feel like that causes a lot of anxiety in younger kids especially. I know if I was rushed, I would get really stressed out when I was younger, so just kind of letting them form relationships and work on social skills during transitions, I think, was very helpful as well. And that's one thing I really liked about the Montebello School. They really seemed to put an emphasis on child well-being and just making sure that their students were happy to attend the school. And then the last school that really stuck out to me in terms of forming relationships was the Colegio Técnico in San Jose, and it surprised me. One, because it was a rural school, but it had way more resources than the San Luis school. It had an IT lab, an auto shop, a mechanical engineering building. So that just surprised me that it was also a public rural school, but it just seemed to have a lot more resources. I was also surprised because the English of the students as well as the teachers in the school were also a lot better than the public high school in San Jose that was more urban. They just seemed a lot more fluent, and they seemed to understand us a lot better, which I thought, again, was interesting since it was a public high school and it was more rural, so you would think that they wouldn't have as many resources, especially towards English instructors, but they proved me wrong. And I really liked this trip because I got to form a connection with a 12th grade student whose specialty was going to be in, it was kind of like customer service, and I asked him, I'm like, oh, have you ever had any experience? He said that he had an internship with the Western Union Bank because they're outsourcing a lot of their customer support to Costa Rica and Central America. And I asked him, like, how was that for you since English is your second language? He's like, I had a really hard time with Americans because they speak so fast and they get so angry if you don't answer them right away. And I thought back to the times where I was on call customer support with someone who didn't speak English as their first language, and I'm trying to think how hard it must be for them that they want to help you, but the language barrier is something that's keeping them from helping you. And I asked him, and I told him jokingly that if I ever had him on the line, I would make sure to talk slowly and clearly and not get mad at him. And I feel like this is something Americans particularly need to get in their heads, that they need to be more patient with people who are different from them and who don't speak English as their first language. And Americans cannot assume that everyone speaks fluent English, even if they are on a customer support line, that they need to have the patience to wait and try to find ways to communicate with people that isn't aggressive or condescending. So I feel like this conversation with the student really allowed me to feel, or just kind of take into perspective how hard others try to learn English and how unwilling Americans are to learn other languages. So I thought that was just really interesting coming from a student who really wants to help other people, and he thinks that learning English is kind of his ticket to like having a good career. So that was just kind of mind-boggling to me, that learning a language could really determine where you go in life. School visits aside, I really enjoyed the excursions we took, particularly to Monteverde. I was so amazed that they have such an emphasis on being eco-friendly and conservation, and I feel like it's a small enough country where they can focus on it, and but I think the U.S. can definitely do more in terms of conservation, since we are a first world country and we do a lot of production and we do import and export, and I think there are a lot of ways in which that we can become more eco-friendly and conservation friendly, since we do produce a lot of trash, since we have so many products coming in and out. So it was just really interesting to see how the Institute was founded and how it really just focuses on recycling and being more eco-friendly. And the one trip I really enjoyed in Monteverde was going ziplining, because I am not one to really be adventurous, outgoing, or extroverted. Those are all the things I would say I'm not, but I was really excited to go on the trip because I had this little voice in my head that kept saying, if you don't do it, you're going to regret it later. So I was really kind of nervous but excited to do it at the same time. I think being strapped in helped, because I'm kind of a worrywart about safety, but I feel like seeing the landscape from not a tour bus was really interesting, and just seeing how beautiful the landscape is and how untouched it is and like underdeveloped it is by man. I feel like it really made me feel very small in the world, but also feeling like I should explore more of the world, because this is such a small portion of it and it's already this amazing. So I really want to go out and travel more to just get that experience again. I also think that it related to teaching, because there wasn't really a yes or no, like you either do it, or there wasn't any maybes. It was either you do it or you don't. And I feel like that speaks a truth for a lot of things in life. You can't really live your life on maybes or what ifs, or I could have done this, I should have done this. It's either yes or no, you did it or you didn't. And I think that ziplining kind of is a metaphor for my future career. Like, it's either you do it or you don't, and then you have to live with your decision. So I'm glad that I went ziplining to kind of get this perspective on life. And I don't know, it's just something that I'm really glad I did, and I don't regret doing it in the slightest. In terms of the Manuel Antonio trip, I think other than getting one of the worst sunburns of my life, I feel like it really let me live how Costa Ricans do and really embrace the pura vida aspect of living and just relaxing, taking a break. I was really surprised at how much freedom we had in the schedule. It was basically eat breakfast, go on the nature hike, and then do whatever you want. So that kind of freaked me out. I'm like, why do we have so much freedom? This whole trip was so scheduled and so down to like the hour, when to get on the bus, when to get off, what school we're going to, and then just having afternoon on your own was kind of a shock to me. But I feel like just taking a break from work in school, I hadn't taken a vacation since my senior year of high school, so I think this was much needed. And I feel like just everyone needs that time to themselves and just kind of reflect on how their life is going and just relax. I feel like everyone should take that, and I feel like no matter what your career is, student, teacher, administrator, whatever career you're in, you need that time to yourself and to relax and just appreciate the things in life that you are able to do. Overall, I was very grateful that I was able to take this trip. I got 2 scholarships that made it a little financially easier to go on the trip, so I'm thankful for those. I'm thankful that my parents, particularly my dad, held on to their skepticism and let me go on the trip, because they've never been outside the country either, and I was the first to go abroad out of my family. And I don't know, words can't describe how thankful I am for my host family and how they made me feel so welcome and a part of their family in the short time that I was able to go there. And I hope that I will be able to stay in touch with them as I go through college and get a job. And I really just hope that I can maintain that connection with them. I'm most thankful for the connections I was able to make with the students and our tour guide and even you guys as professors. It was really nice to just see you guys kind of out of your teacher element and really letting go and having fun. And it's nice to see that we are able to connect with you outside of the classroom, but still keep it a professional relationship. And I'm most thankful for the connection I was able to make with the students and the memories that I will be able to take with me as I go into my third year at ISU and into my future. I just want to say thank you for watching, and as always, pura vida.